The twin sons of Drydus cast long shadows across the verdant plains as Cassius Valerius guided his agrarobot through the swaying fields of golden wheat. The machine hummed softly, its articulated arms gently testing each stalk for optimal harvest readiness. Cassius wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes drifting towards the horizon, where the gleaming spires of Nova Roma pierced the dusky sky. Admiring the view again, son, his father's voice crackled through the agrarobot's communicator. Those fields won't tend themselves, you know. Cassius sighed, returning his attention to the task at hand. Sorry, father, just got distracted for a moment. As he worked, Cassius couldn't help but feel the weight of generations upon his shoulders. The Valerius family had tended these fields since the early days of colonization, when Drydus was nothing more than a promising seed in the vast garden of stars. Now, centuries later, it was the jewel of the Confederation, a world where ancient traditions and futuristic marvels intertwined like the very vines that climbed the marble columns of their villa. A sudden shadow passed overhead, causing Cassius to look up once more. His heart quickened as he saw the sleek hull of an imperial recruitment ship, its golden eagle emblem catching the last rays of the setting suns. The vessel descended towards the nearby town square, its anti-grav engines stirring the wheat into a frenzy. Without a second thought, Cassius set the agrarobot to autopilot and sprinted towards the square, his feet carrying him swiftly along the well-worn path. As he ran, he passed by the familiar sights of his home, the aqueduct that carried not just water but data and power to the surrounding farms, the holographic statues of past emperors that flickered to life as he passed, reciting tales of glory and duty. The town square was already buzzing with excitement when Cassius arrived, out of breath and wide-eyed. A holographic banner unfurled from the ship, displaying the words "For the glory of Drydus" in shimmering gold letters. A recruiter, clad in the sleek power armor of the Drydian legions, stepped forth, his voice amplified by unseen speakers. Citizens of the Confederation, hear the call of your emperor, Julius Franco. The stars themselves beckon us, promising new worlds, new riches, new glory for Drydus. Cassius felt his heart swell with each word. This was it, his chance to be part of something greater, to see the wonders of the galaxy with his own eyes instead of through holograms and data feeds. As the recruiter continued his speech, Cassius's eyes were drawn to a demonstration off to the side. A Legionnaire stood encased in full battle armor, a marvel of engineering that blended the iconic look of ancient Roman legionaries with the most advanced materials science had to offer. The segmented plates shifted and realigned as the soldier moved, offering maximum protection and flexibility. Imagine yourself wielding the power of the Imperium, the recruiter's voice boomed, bringing the light of civilization to the darkest corners of the galaxy. Cassius was so entranced that he barely noticed the hand on his shoulder until his father spoke. I remember that look, the elder Valerius said softly. I wore it myself, once upon a time. Cassius turned, surprised. You never told me you wanted to join the legions. His father's eyes were distant, reflecting the light of the recruitment ship. Wanted to, aye. But duty to the family, to our lands, kept me here. He squeezed Cassius's shoulder. Perhaps it's time for a Valerius to see the stars up close, eh? Before Cassius could respond, a commotion near the ship caught their attention. A group of protesters had emerged from the crowd, their signs decrying the expansion of the Confederation and the corruption of the Senate. More worlds mean more exploitation, one shouted. The Senate grows fat while the colonies starve. The recruiter's facade of confidence wavered for a moment before he regained his composure. The glory of Drydus lifts all citizens. It is our destiny to bring order and prosperity to the galaxy. As the arguments heated up, Cassius felt torn. The protesters' words stirred doubts he had long suppressed, whispers of injustice he had heard in the markets and taverns. Yet the allure of the stars, the promise of adventure and purpose, pulled at him with irresistible force. In that moment of internal conflict, Cassius's eyes met those of a young woman in the crowd. She stood apart from both the eager recruits and the angry protesters, her expression one of quiet determination. Something in her gaze spoke to him, a kindred spirit in a sea of certainty. With a deep breath, Cassius made his decision. He turned to his father, words of farewell already forming on his lips, but the old farmer simply nodded. "Go," he said softly. "Write your own story among the stars, my son." Heart pounding, Cassius stepped forward, raising his hand to volunteer. As the recruiter's eyes fell upon him, he felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Whatever lay ahead, glory or hardship, triumph or tragedy, he would face it as a Legionnaire of Drydus. The recruitment ship's ramp lowered, beckoning Cassius towards his destiny. With one last look at the wheat fields of his youth, gilded by the setting suns, he took his first step towards the stars. Little did he know that the young woman whose gaze had steadied him was also stepping forward, their paths now inexorably intertwined by the hands of fate and the will of the Imperium. As the ship's engines roared to life, carrying the newest recruits towards the orbital training facility of Castrum Stellarum, Cassius Valerius left behind the fertile fields of Drydus for the fertile grounds of adventure that awaited him among the stars. The DCS Imperator hung in high orbit above Aether, its vast hull gleaming in the light of the system's red dwarf star. From the observation deck, Cassius Valerius marveled at the sight below, a world of burnished copper and deep crimson, its surface scarred by massive mining operations visible even from space. Magnificent. Isn't it? The voice belonged to Marcus Antonius, his fellow Legionnaire and unlikely friend. The senator's son stood beside Cassius, his aristocratic features set in a thoughtful frown. "Though I can't help but wonder at what cost such beauty comes." Cassius nodded, thinking back to their graduation ceremony just a few short months ago. Emperor Julius Franco's words still rang in his ears: "You are the sword and shield of Drydus, the light of civilization in a dark galaxy." Now, faced with the reality of their first deployment, those words seemed both more vital and more complicated than ever. A chime sounded throughout the ship, summoning the Legionnaires to the briefing room. As Cassius and Marcus made their way through the corridors, they passed by murals depicting great battles of both ancient Rome and the early days of the Confederation. The juxtaposition of past and future was a constant reminder of the legacy they were meant to uphold. In the briefing room, Centurion Flavius Aquila stood before a holographic display of Aether's main settlement, his scarred face illuminated by the flickering light. Cassius spotted Livia Octavia across the room, the street-smart recruit from Nova Roma's Undercity, catching his eye with a quick nod. "Listen up, Legionnaires," Flavius began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of service. "The situation on Aether has deteriorated. The mining guilds report widespread unrest among the workers. Our mission is to quell this revolt and restore order to the colony." As the Centurion detailed their objectives, Cassius felt a growing unease. This was not the glorious campaign he had imagined when he left the fields of Drydus behind. The descent to Aether's surface was a turbulent affair, their dropship buffeted by winds laden with copper dust. As they emerged onto the landing pad, Cassius's first breath of Aether's air was acrid and metallic, burning his lungs despite the filtration systems in his armor. Before them stretched a vista both alien and strangely familiar. Massive excavation sites plunged deep into the planet's crust, connected by a web of conveyor systems and processing plants. Yet amidst this industrial landscape, Cassius could see echoes of Roman design: aqueducts carrying molten metal instead of water, amphitheaters repurposed as assembly areas for the workers. Their first encounter with the colonists came sooner than expected. As the Legionnaires made their way towards the main administrative complex, a crowd of workers blocked their path. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow beneath the protective goggles they wore. "More lapdogs of the corrupt Senate," one of the workers shouted, his voice raw from years of breathing Aether's caustic atmosphere. "Come to squeeze us dry like they did on Terminus IV." Cassius exchanged a glance with Livia, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. This was not the enemy they had trained to face. "Stand aside," Centurion Flavius commanded, his voice amplified by his armor's systems. "We are here under the authority of Emperor Julius Franco to restore order and protect the interests of all citizens of the Confederation." A bitter laugh rippled through the crowd. "Protect? Where was your protection when the guilds cut our rations? Where was your justice when they extended our shifts beyond human endurance?" The tension was palpable, the situation balanced on a knife's edge. Cassius's hand hovered near his weapon, every instinct honed by months of training screaming at him to be ready for combat. Yet a deeper part of him, the part that still remembered the feel of Drydus soil beneath his feet, hesitated. It was Gaius Petronius, the colony-born recruit with a perpetual chip on his shoulder, who broke the stalemate. Stepping forward, he removed his helmet, revealing features not so different from those of the workers before them. "I am Gaius Petronius," he announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed square. "I was born on Novus Aventine, another mining world not so different from this one. I've seen what unchecked greed can do to a colony." He paused, looking back at his fellow legionnaires before continuing. "We're not here to oppress you. We're here to listen, to understand, and to find a solution that serves all citizens of Drydus." For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the crowd began to part. An older woman stepped forward, her face a map of lines etched by years of hardship. "I am Valeria," she said, her voice strong despite her frail appearance. "I speak for the workers of Aether. If you truly wish to listen, then come. We have much to show you." As they followed Valeria into the warren of tunnels and prefabricated habitats that housed Aether's workforce, Cassius felt as though he were seeing the underbelly of the Confederation for the first time. The gleaming promise of Drydus seemed very far away in the face of such suffering. Their tour ended in a makeshift meeting hall, where representatives of the various mining crews had gathered. For hours, Cassius and his fellow legionnaires listened to tales of exploitation, of safety measures ignored in the name of profit, of workers pushed to the brink of collapse to meet ever-increasing quotas. As the final speaker finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Centurion Flavius, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. "What you have shown us today is troubling," he said, choosing his words carefully. "It is clear that the situation on Aether is more complex than we were led to believe. I give you my word as a servant of Drydus that your grievances will be heard." A ripple of hope passed through the assembled workers, but Cassius could see skepticism in many eyes. Words alone would not be enough to heal the wounds inflicted by years of neglect and exploitation. As they made their way back to their base camp, Cassius found himself walking beside Livia. "This isn't what I signed up for," he admitted quietly. Livia's laugh was without humor. "Welcome to the real Confederation, farm boy. Shiny on the outside, rotten at the core." Before Cassius could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the settlement. The night sky above Aether lit up with the fire of incoming ships, their designs unlike anything in the Confederation's arsenal. Battle station, Centurion Flavius's voice cut through the chaos. "Unknown hostiles incoming. This is not a drill." As Cassius rushed to his assigned position, his mind reeled. In the span of a single day, everything he thought he knew about his duty and the empire he served had been called into question. Now, facing an unknown enemy, he wondered if he would live long enough to make sense of it all. The copper skies of Aether, so alien and yet so rich with promise, now seemed to burn with the fires of an uncertain future. Whatever came next, Cassius knew that he and his fellow legionnaires would face it together, for better or for worse. The sky above Aether erupted into chaos as the unknown vessels breached the atmosphere. Their organic, almost insectoid design stood in stark contrast to the clean lines of Drydian ships. Cassius Valerius, his armor sealed against the copper-laden air, watched in awe and terror as the first of these alien craft touched down on the outskirts of the mining settlement. "By Jupiter's beard," Marcus whispered over the comm, "what manner of creatures are these?" They didn't have to wait long for an answer. The alien ships split open like seed pods, disgorging swarms of chitinous warriors. Their movements were a horrifying blend of insect and machine, servos whirring as multiple limbs brandished weapons that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. Vorax, Centurion Flavius's voice crackled through their comms. "We've had skirmishes with them on the fringes, but never this deep in Confederation space." Cassius's mind raced. The Vorax were more than just a nameless enemy now. They were a tangible threat to everything he had sworn to protect. Yet as he looked back at the haggard faces of the Aether colonists, he couldn't help but wonder what exactly was he protecting. There was no time for philosophical debates. The Vorax advanced with terrifying speed, their bioorganic weapons spewing corrosive acids and electromagnetic pulses that played havoc with Drydian tech. Fall back to the central processing plant, Flavius ordered. We need to consolidate our defenses. As they retreated, Cassius found himself running alongside Valeria, the worker representative. Your people, he panted, they need to take shelter. Valeria's laugh was bitter. Shelter? The only shelter we have is the mines themselves, and I'll be damned if I'll let those insects take what we've bled for. Her words struck a chord in Cassius. These weren't just disgruntled workers, they were citizens of Drydus, as worthy of protection as any senator's son. Inside the processing plant, a makeshift command center was hastily established. Livia, her scout training proving invaluable, reported on the Vorax's movements. They're not just attacking blindly, she observed. They're targeting our power generators and communication arrays. This is a coordinated invasion. Gaius, who had been poring over schematics of the mining facility, suddenly looked up. The main excavation laser, he said, excitement creeping into his voice. If we can repurpose it, turn it into a defensive weapon. It would give us a fighting chance, Flavius finished, nodding approvingly. But we'd need to hold them off long enough to make the modifications. Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. We can't do this alone. We need the colonists' help. All eyes turned to Valeria. The old woman stood straighter, years seeming to fall away as she nodded. You'll have it. Every miner here knows these machines better than they know themselves. Just tell us what you need. What followed was a desperate race against time. As Cassius and his fellow legionnaires held the line against wave after wave of Vorax attackers, the miners worked feverishly to convert their massive excavation laser into a weapon of war. The battle pushed Cassius to his limits and beyond. He saw Marcus take a glancing blow from a Vorax acid weapon, the nobleman's son fighting on even as his armor smoldered. Livia moved like a ghost through the chaos, her hidden blades finding weak spots in the aliens' exoskeletons. And Gaius, the once bitter colonist, stood shoulder to shoulder with the miners he had so recently mistrusted, jury-rigging defenses with a mix of high-tech components and industrial tools. Just when it seemed they could hold out no longer, a deafening hum filled the air. The repurposed mining laser, now a massive cannon, swiveled towards the Vorax lines. Valeria herself stood at the controls, her face set in grim determination. For Aether, she cried, and fired. The beam that erupted from the cannon was a thing of terrifying beauty, a concentrated burst of energy that cut through the Vorax forces like a hot knife through butter. The alien soldiers scattered, their coordinated assault thrown into disarray. As the tide of battle turned, Cassius found himself pushing forward, leading a counterattack into the very heart of the Vorax landing zone. It was there, in the shadow of one of the alien vessels, that he made a discovery that would change everything. Half buried in the copper-rich soil of Aether was an artifact, its design a mind-bending blend of Vorax bioorganics and what looked unmistakably like ancient human writing. Centurion Cassius called, his voice shaking. You need to see this. As the last of the Vorax retreated, their ships lifting off in a cacophony of alien engines, the legionnaires and miners gathered around the artifact. Flavius studied it intently, his expression unreadable behind his helmet's faceplate. This complicates things, the Centurion said at last. If there's a connection between humanity and the Vorax, it could change everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. Marcus finished, his scholarly background shining through despite his battle-worn appearance. In the days that followed, as Confederation reinforcements arrived and the cleanup began, Cassius found himself grappling with impossible questions. The artifact was quarantined, its existence kept secret from all but a select few. The official report would make no mention of it, focusing instead on the heroic defense of Aether against an alien aggressor. But Cassius knew the real story was far more complex. He had seen the best and worst of the Confederation in the span of a few short days. The corruption that allowed exploitation on worlds like Aether, the bravery of both legionnaires and colonists in the face of annihilation, and now this hint of a hidden history that could shake the very foundations of Drydian society. As he stood on the landing pad, preparing to board the ship that would take them to their next assignment, Cassius looked out over the scarred landscape of Aether. The miners were already back at work, the great machines of industry humming once more. But things were different now. A new respect had been forged between the Legionnaires and the colonists, a bond tempered in the heat of battle. Livia appeared at his side, her armor as battered as his own. Quite a first deployment, farm boy. Cassius managed a tired smile. Not quite what I imagined when I left Drydus. But would you take it back, she asked, her eyes searching his face. He thought of the wheat fields of home, of the shining promises of the recruitment speeches. He thought of the harsh realities of Aether, the bravery of its people, and the mysteries that now lay before them. No, he said at last. I wouldn't take back a single moment. As they boarded the ship, Centurion Flavius approached them. We're being reassigned, he said, his voice low. A world called Funiculara, the Senate has. Concerns about the situation there. Cassius exchanged a glance with Livia. They both knew that concerns could mean anything from genuine unrest to another example of colonial exploitation. But whatever awaited them on Funiculara, they would face it together, as Legionnaires of Drydus, forever changed by their experiences on Aether. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them away from the copper world that had tested them so thoroughly. As Aether receded beneath them, Cassius thought of the artifact, hidden away in the ship's hold. Whatever secrets it held, whatever truths it might reveal about humanity's past and the Vorax, he knew that the galaxy was a far larger and more complex place than he had ever imagined. The Eagle's talons had been tested, and while they had held firm, the experience had revealed cracks in the very foundation of the Drydus Confederation. As they soared towards their next challenge, Cassius Valerius, once a simple farmer from Drydus, now a battle-hardened legionnaire, steeled himself for whatever the stars might hold. For in this vast and ancient galaxy, the true test of a civilization lay not in its conquests, but in its ability to face the unknown with courage, compassion, and an unwavering search for truth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.